The CFA exams definitely make you smarter, but maybe not in the way you might expect. Studying for and taking CFA exams can definitely improve your brain's ability to read, learn, process, and understand information. Of course, throughout this process, you're going to learn very valuable financial concepts that can be applied towards academics or your career. But I think the most significant way that the CFA program helps candidates build their intelligence is by teaching them how exactly their brain learns. And that's not an easy thing to do. If you're new to the channel, my name's AJ, thanks for being here. I'm a CFA charter holder, a retail financial advisor, and I passed all 3 CFA exams on the first attempt. Like many of you, I went up through primary school, elementary school, I went to high school. I had to study for, maybe not all, but some tests in high school. I took some advanced or AP classes during high school that are meant to develop the minds of high-achieving high school students. Getting into college or university, I learned that I had to study a lot more for those classes than I had to in high school, so I got a little bit better and better at studying for exams and answering questions correctly. But I can confidently tell you that the shift I recognized in my own understanding of how my brain learns new information between the level 1 and the level 2 CFA exams was not like anything I had experienced throughout all my learning in my elementary, high school, college days. And other people have told you the same thing. If you watch other CFA related YouTube videos, you've certainly heard from Mark Meldrum. He talks a lot about the learning process and getting a better handle on how you personally learn when you're reading through material and quizzing yourself on material. And there are plenty of others out there as well who have spoken about this. Whenever someone is pursuing an extremely difficult academic challenge, and specifically when that academic challenge or program is requiring constant and daily study, and not just to the tune of 10 or 30 minutes each day, it's hours and hours and hours each day, that amount of repetition and that amount of stress on your brain in trying to internalize new information will just inevitably teach you things about how your brain learns. I don't know how to put it better than that. And once you start to realize what types of mental processes are allowing your brain to learn new information, you can then think about new information in that light, and you'll be able to retain, understand, and then comprehend, ultimately those 3 things being learn, new information much more efficiently and effectively than you ever were able to before. And that is what I mean by getting smarter. The CFA exams will do this for you, and the CFA exams will make you smarter. Now, I would not claim that the CFA program is 100% effective at making every single candidate who has ever pursued it smarter. And there are a couple cases in which you might not actually get smarter. The most common would be someone who studies for the level 1 exam and they maybe only study 50 or 100 hours, and they either don't sit for the test or they sit for it but perform very poorly. They never really took the program seriously. Doing it that way is not going to put your brain through the mental stress that is required to really teach yourself how your brain learns, which is what I'm describing here. The other scenario could be someone who actually passes all 3 exams and becomes a CFA charter holder, but importantly suffers from overconfidence because of that, or cockiness. As great of a body of work as the CFA curriculum is, and as good of a job as the exams do at teaching its candidates all that information, whenever a person assumes that they know more than they really do, it will almost always result in some type of inefficiencies or mental errors. So although the CFA curriculum is vast, there is exponentially more information out there about financial markets than any body of knowledge could cover for, one individual to learn and memorize and process all of it. So if someone became a charter holder, instantly assumed that they now knew everything about investing, and especially if they started making investment decisions more recklessly, then you could certainly make the argument that that person is not actually smarter by having had pursued the CFA designation. So those are the 2 admissions. The argument in this video does not encompass every single candidate who has ever pursued the CFA program, but I would almost venture to say, even if you never pass level 2, but you do sit for level 2, and at least study well for level 2 and learn most of the information. Again, even if you didn't necessarily learn quite enough information to pass the level 2 exam, going through that process for 2 or more years, being through level 1 and the level 2 test, I think is enough to start to help you learn how your brain learns, like I talked about earlier. This might not be a perfect analogy, but it sort of, to me, feels like going from someone who is very good at playing basketball, it can hit a lot of free throws if they're just shooting around in their backyard, to developing into the person who can close their eyes and still hit those free throws. In the analogy, hitting the free throw is learning a new piece of information. And I know that when I was a level 1 candidate, I had to really use a lot of trial and error in learning a lot of the concepts through the CFA curriculum. I would read it, get it wrong, do some practice questions, get them wrong, and eventually, after enough repetition, it would sort of click for me and I would start to make the free throws. But during the later parts of my level 2 studying, and certainly throughout all of my level 3 studying, I had literally developed an understanding for what type of mental pathways that I had to process new information through to get my brain to digest or internalize and understand that information. So what that allowed me to do, and I'm not crazy here, other people have talked about this same thing, so trust me on this, but what that allows you to do is read a new piece of information you haven't seen before, and then process that information the right way for your brain. Process that information the way that most efficiently is going to stick with you. So back to the free throw analogy, I did not need to do so much trial and error anymore with the new information. I instead was more confident in how I needed to release the basketball, and I could make the free throws similarly, but in an easier way. To try to describe the understanding of efficient mental processes one more time, I can remember teachers when I was a kid saying, "Oh, it just clicked for you, didn't it?" And I never really understood that, but I think it just has to do something with how your brain works. Different people's brains literally process information or work differently, and I've sort of learned that over the years, and so I never really experienced the click thing too much, but I totally get that other people may have not been able to understand how to divide fractions, and then after seeing it in some light, boom, they get an understanding for it, and then that understanding can be applied to dividing all other fractions in the future. So I think what I'm describing is an understanding of how you get your brain to that click. In what ways do you need to think about new information? Do you need to think through 3 examples of that information? Do you need to try to compare that information to other instances or other principles in which you'd had heard that information applied before, in the case of the CFA exams, in some other economic setting or what have you? I think the way your brain gets to that click is a little bit different for everyone, but what I'm trying to describe is an understanding of how your brain gets to that click. And once you have that understanding, you simply apply that mental process to each piece of new information. You become a much more efficient learner. You become smarter. And there's a really encouraging reality to this point that I made earlier on in the video, that maybe the most significant improvement in intellect that you gain from the CFA program is through this understanding of learning rather than just knowing more financial concepts. The reason that type of intellectual development is so encouraging, as I'm describing it here, because that means your new understanding of how you learn can be applied to any other field, any other type of information that you come across for the rest of your life. It's not just going to be isolated towards finance information in the example of the CFA program. You're not just going to be smarter about financial markets. I think you're going to be smarter about everything. Your IQ literally goes up once you understand how you learn. So I want to share how being this smart has impacted my life now. I am literally so smart now that the biggest hedge funds in the world are constantly begging me to come work for them. Many of them are offering me over $1 billion a year in salary and incentive compensation. But I'm just so smart now that it almost doesn't make sense for me to take a job where I'm only earning $1 billion a year, because of course, with my vast intelligence, I very easily understand compounding returns. And if you compound returns at the same rate that we've seen some of the cryptocurrencies grow over the past couple of years, take Dogecoin for example, that was up 9 million% in 1 month. When you're as smart as I am, you're basically able to tell the future. So I can guarantee that I'm going to be able to identify each asset class that will experience at least something around a 1,000% monthly return, which would be something like a 10,000 or 20,000% annualized return. And I'm just going to invest all my personal funds there. Once that compounds over the next 10 years or so, my net worth will quickly surpass the market cap of the biggest companies in the world out there right now, not just the traded companies, also including Saudi Arabia's Aramco on that list. And then with that kind of exponential compounding, in a matter of weeks, I will likely have enough net worth to buy the entire market caps for the entire equity, fixed income, and alternative markets on the entire globe. So I personally will own every piece of real estate, every share of every company, and every single debt issuance on the entire planet. So I don't want to go work for a hedge fund. I'm just going to use my unbelievably smart brain, thanks to the CFA program, to achieve the most noble pursuit I could ever imagine, which would be owning everything on the entire planet and then allowing the 8 billion people who live on that planet to be my servants and learn the information that I know, because they will surely be able to then apply that type of information in their own lives and better themselves and their families for many generations to come in the future. Thank you very much for sticking around to the end of this video. I appreciate you watching. If you haven't already, please like this and subscribe to the channel to see what's coming out in the coming weeks, and have a good one.